Um, yeah, what's up, everybody? It's Jeff. We're gonna be starting a new series. I'm just gonna kind of do this as often as I have the time, I guess. And everything is gonna get uploaded to YouTube afterward. But I thought it might be a good idea to just share some of the things that I've learned coaching across different games, both IRL and online, and then hopefully help people learn some of the basics that I didn't know when I started, whether they be, coaching basics or playing basics. Just try and help everybody on the fundamentals of all the games that they play, not just one game in particular. By the way, if anybody is in chat, let me know if my audio levels are good. I just spent like an hour messing with all my different settings to try and make sure my mic was working properly. So yeah, if it's not working properly, then that was so help me out. Also, if you've got any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. And then if you're watching this on YouTube, leave them in the comments. I'll check them. I check all of the CataclysmGaming comments, and that's where this will be uploaded on the CataclysmGaming YouTube channel. But yeah, I want to talk about warm-ups because I'm a pretty firm believer that people do warm-ups wrong for almost every game, whether that be as a team or an individual. I know it makes me sound like a clickbait ad to say that, but at the same time, the number of times I've worked with somebody and talked to somebody and tried to get information on them, right? And it's like, okay, you're gonna play ranked, you're struggling to win your games. What's what's your warm up like? And they're like, oh well, I don't have a warm up, or they show me a warm up, and I'm like, okay, well let's cover that. Let's go over warm up. I've personally seen a lot of people play and trying to climb in ranked gain a lot of SR or MMR or RR just by adjusting their warm up routine, right? Just by changing how they warm up, what it is they do before they get into the game. That is obnoxious. And when they do, they're really like blown away. But you watch professional athletes before they play their game, and then you don't warm up before you play your game. I don't know. Seems kind of logical to me. So, anyways, I want to get into just like what is a warm up, right? And then we can talk about why we do them a little bit. So warm up it's about being prepared to play the game. Now, my experience having worked with and coached a lot of people and played a lot of games myself is that it takes the average person, the average player, about 2 hours of straight gameplay, no matter what the game is, before they're warm, before they're playing close to their peak level, before they're playing at the level that their rank says they should be playing at. What that usually means is that they lose for the first 2 hours. Now, if you're playing Valorant or Dota or League, maybe that's just 2 games. And if you're playing Overwatch, that might be 10. So we really want to mitigate that, limit it, not just throw ourselves under the bus in that way. A good friend of mine would log on, lose 6 games in a row, and then win 6 games in a row.
Incoming diabolical.
Couldn't figure out why. Came up with a 5-minute warm-up for her, and she still usually lost her first game, but it was just one 20-minute game, and then she climbed like 600 SR in Overwatch, just because she didn't have to go on these huge loss streaks at the beginning of her day, right? So different people, different players, all work differently. Some people require more, some people require less. Sometimes the same person requires more or less. My warm-up time varies pretty heavily depending on how I'm feeling on the day. Maybe I'm a little extra tired, maybe I'm extra cold, maybe I'm feeling really good and I have a really good warm-up and it doesn't take me as long. That's something else I want to talk about too, is like how much time do we spend on warm-ups, right? The idea here is that we're going to save time. And when you look at like a 2-hour window to reach peak performance, then that's not hard to accomplish. The reason for that is because of repetition, right? So when you're playing your game, you're looking for a high number of reps, and let's say you have a 20-round game of Valorant, and in that 20 rounds, you see a total of maybe 25 people, and that means that you fired your gun 25 times. Now, how long did it take you to play 20 rounds of Valorant? Probably somewhere in the range of, I don't know, 25 to 30 minutes. So we're looking at conservatively, very optimistically, right? We're looking at 25 minutes. And that's just pretty tough. Now, if you spend 60 seconds in the training range with the bots, it's not unreasonable to say that with the bots, you might do 100 shots in 1 minute. The math is pretty simple here, right? A warm-up is designed to get you the maximum number of reps in the smallest amount of time on a specific task, so that specific task is already at its peak efficiency by the time you start to play. Now, a perfect warm-up doesn't take you to peak efficiency. It takes you to almost peak efficiency. If you're talking about Valorant, that first 3 rounds aren't going to be your best. They're going to be still easing into the game. If we're talking about Dota or League, your laning stage, you're not going to be 100%. You might miss an ability or two. We're talking about Overwatch, your first couple shots might be a little weird. Now, I say that in the scope of, hey, we're gonna play ranked, and we're gonna play ranked for, more than just one game. We're gonna play ranked for freaking 10 games, right? We're gonna play ranked for 4 hours, and that means that we need to be good for all 4 games from beginning to end, not just petering off right here and then crashing. We want to be consistent. That means starting a little slow, finishing a bit more strong, right? Much better to squeeze in an extra game at the end and have a rough first 5 minutes than to have a killer first 5 minutes and then lose a whole extra game. So your warm-up should take you to almost peak performance, and it should hit all of the areas that you need in order to play the game. Now, different games have different mechanics and different things that they require you to be able to do and not do, and we'll get into all that, right? But the first thing that I want to look at is, like, what do you need to play the game, right? So, I wonder if it's possible to make this bigger. Guess not. So the first thing is mechanics, right? This is what everybody knows from a warm-up, right? This is shooting bots, right? This is hitting CS in a MOBA. This is this is movement in a lot of games, right? There's a lot of aspects to mechanics. The second thing we got to warm up, one of my players said, CG said it this way, mechanics, mind, mouth, right? give us this triple M. So we're gonna go with mind here. I just like unfuzz your brain, turn your brain on, activate brain was one of my favorite sayings when I was coaching Overwatch Masters players. That's definitely the thing that they need to warm up the most. Generally, they're quite good at this whole bit. It's the brain part that people in that ascendant or masters sort of rank, that's where they start to lack, right? So this is your game sense, your decision making, anything regarding thinking quickly. All right, you give somebody 5 minutes to figure out a good chess move. Most people, especially most people who are playing something competitively, who are practicing it regularly and have familiarity with it, can come up with a good idea. But the thing is, in games, we don't have 5 minutes. We measure the game in milliseconds. So this is quick thought processes. Lots of information in. What's your output? And then if you're playing a team game, which a lot of us do, Overwatch, Dota, League, Valorant, anything where you have teammates, right? Your mouth also needs to be warm. You need to be able to talk as easily as you breathe. And I'm gonna split these up here, and we'll talk about those, no pun intended, separately. But we'll get into these, and we'll get into some good ways to kind of combine and work on them together, right? So we're gonna take our approach today is gonna be a shooter style. So we're gonna look at this from the point of view of shooter games. This is my greatest familiarity. This is something that I've got a lot of experience with, and it's something that's going to be easily relatable to a lot of people and generally not that hard to translate, right? Plus, there's a lot of complexity in shooter games when it comes to the mechanics aspect of it. It's a very mechanics intense thing. So that's why we're here in Diabolical, right? And we're here in the practice range. I'm capable of shooting probably 150 bots in the span of just a couple minutes if I were to sit here and do this over and over, you know? And honestly, if all you want to do is warm up your ability to shoot things, there's nothing wrong with this. You know? Change up your angle a little bit, work on just hitting these easy shots. It's not a bad place to start, especially for this tutorial. You know, you want to work out a different weapon. You know, you can just stay here, keep it nice and easy. Don't get too complicated. My sensitivity is very high. I just changed it. So, you know, it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but as we mentioned, there's a lot of mechanics in the game. Now, if I wanted to do that, there is just a shooting gallery practice / warm up for Diabolical. It's a good thing to be in, right? But I also want my mechanics as far as my movement to be good. So, stupid bug. Won't let you shoot after you pick something up. So one thing that you can do is you can be in an area like this and work on keeping your movement clean while still hitting shots, and then you can get a feel of when to change your movement to make hitting a shot worthwhile, right? So you have a good idea of, okay, when should I be jumping, when should I be flicking, right? Like, it's going to be easier for me to hit my shot midair because I don't need my mouse to move. Because there's strafe jumping in this game, which is part of the movement mechanic. I need my mouse when I make contact with the ground if I'm going to keep my momentum. Also, I have to time it with the rails. So there's a lot of aspects here that need to be taken into consideration. Now, one thing that's important, right, is that, like, this is not a terrible warm-up for Diabolical. It's a little bit higher rep than if I were to play Diabolical, and there's nothing to threaten me, which is important too, right? Let's say that you've got a death match. Death matches are cool. Death matches teach you to be aware of the map. They teach you to be aware of your corners. They teach you to take fights properly and quickly in rapid succession. Death matches are a great thing to do as part of a warm-up, except that you die in death matches, and every moment you spend dead is time that you spend not killing people. And yeah, you know what? You may only be dead for a second and a half, but let's say you die 4 times in a row. 3 to bad spawns, 2 to losing gunfights. Oh, guess what? That's a grand total of like 8-10 seconds you've spent doing nothing but dying and walking back into gunfights, sometimes to your own detriment. So, when you're in an area like this, a practice range of sorts, something with bots, something that you can reliably crank out high numbers, you're going to find yourself hitting much higher reps. It won't feel like it, but you're going to get more shots off. You're going to get more opportunities to fight things. You don't need your movement around the map to be clean in the sense of like, oh, well, I need to peek this angle and jiggle peek it in such a way that, oh, I'm able to hit my shots while still dodging and AD strafing and all that jazz. You don't have to worry about that. If you want to force yourself to do it like I just did, then you totally can. But for the most part, you just want your movement and your weapons play to sync up, you know? Be connected. So, when you're doing your initial warm-up, I recommend don't start with a deathmatch. Reason for that being, you're not warm yet. You're fighting people. Maybe they've been playing 4 death matches in a row. Maybe they just are bored and they're just playing deathmatch all day. I've been that person. So what I recommend you do is do something like this. Do something non-threatening. Do something that's going to allow you to focus on hitting your shots, getting comfortable with your mouse, getting comfortable with your movement, being ready and prepared to get into that game and hold your own in a deathmatch. Because if you're in a deathmatch and you hold a 2.0 KD against everybody else in the deathmatch, you got a lot out of that deathmatch. But if you get into the deathmatch and you come out of it like a 0.8 KD, then you probably wasted time. And in the grand scheme of things, let's say it's a Valorant deathmatch and it took 20 minutes, you probably wasted about 5 or 6 minutes. And if you had just spent 5 minutes in an area like this, maybe even less, then you would have gotten more out of the deathmatch as a whole, right? There's a lot of give and take there, but you want to find that kind of balance. That's why stuff like Aim Labs and Kovacs are really, really good because they allow you to isolate that mechanic and get really high repetitions and in a limited amount of time. Another thing that's really good is score, right? So when you're doing a warm-up, particularly one where you're not threatened or pressured, score is really, really valuable. I could sit in here forever and not know what was happening. But it keeps track of my score, and it also keeps track of my time. Now, I've been leaving this open for quite a while now, so it's in no way indicative of if I were hard grinding kills in a short amount of time. But if you find an area that you can go to where you're able to keep track of your score, such as Aim Labs, then you can set thresholds, and those thresholds will let you know if you're ready. Now, I don't ever recommend setting your personal best as your threshold. I recommend setting something like your average, if you can find an average. I almost reinstalled Overwatch to do this one. Because I had a really good Cassidy warm-up on there that was directly tied to a certain set of results. See, moments like this, okay, you know you've got problems with certain buys or whatever, but you also know you're not warm.
30 seconds remaining.
Spend a lot of time drawing on the whiteboard, so. But this is a 60-second practice range, and I will get as many kills in it as I have time. I've seen people get close to 100 kills in this. You can really rack it up if you're better than me. Much better than me. Right?
Victory.
So, this isn't good enough. And I know that. I can look at these numbers and I can say, I can play better than that. So let me run it again. And in that way, you won't spend any more time than you absolutely have to on your warm-up, right? Because you're going to be able to isolate your target score, and that'll prevent you from having to waste extra time, as opposed to something that's a little bit more ambiguous, where you have no idea what your end goal is, and you're just kind of playing until it feels good. And I've seen people go, oh man, it feels great, and then go into their game and get rolled because they hit a hot streak in their warm-up and they didn't have a target that they could set, and then look at it and go, well, it was too easy for me to hit that target. You know what? I'm not going to just hop onto my aim trainer and then get a personal best. That's not how this works. Oh man, I hate the bouncing back and forth.
Victory.
See, reaction time down, almost 500 MS. Accuracy was up 12%. Final score was probably 30+% higher. You know, I know that I'm trending in the right direction, right? I haven't done this in forever, so I have no idea what my numbers should be. But I do know that since I have a measurable statistic here, I can set a bar and save myself a lot of time on my warm-up when it comes to my mechanics. And that's really valuable. Now, headed back to this screen here, we've also got the game sense and decisions, right? Now, this is where pressure is valuable. This is where your death matches, your insta-gibbs, your ARAMs, you know, what have you, your spike rushes even. This is where those are worth something. Now, the higher reps, again, the better. So, you know, if I feel like I need to warm up my brain, I'll load up a Nightmare Bots Quake Live game, or not Quake Live, Quake Champions game, do classic insta-gib with Nightmare Bots, and basically you get to shoot first, but they don't miss. And so your positioning has to be smart. You have to only take one fight at a time, because if you try and take two at a time, then you get bodied by the bots, you know, because one of them will kill you. And it forces you to think while you play. Same for your Valorant Deathmatch, you know, same for your try-hard FFA and Overwatch. These are situations where you have to consider what's happening around you at a really high pace, at a pace that's much higher than the actual game. And in that way, you can get, in the span of 10 minutes, you can get just as much repetition of difficult situations, of fights, of duels, of outflanks, surprises that you would get over the course of maybe even 2 games, right? You will take more fights in that span than you will over a very long period of time. So that's where you're going to get this. We've already talked at pretty good length about it, so I'm not going to go into any further detail on it. But then there's this last bit. This last bit is where things get interesting and fun. It's talking and it's narrating, right? Now, these can be warmed up all over the place. I've been talking this whole time. I've also been playing. It comes pretty natural to me. I've been doing it for a long time. Been developing that ability to backseat one or the other. I've been backseating the gameplay in exchange for focusing on communicating with you guys. But we could backseat communication in order to focus on the gameplay, which is what more commonly happens to people. Truth is, most people struggle to find a balance. They find themselves on one extreme or the other. I see this a lot with ranked players. Either their comms are godlike and their own contributions to their matches are pretty mediocre, or their comms don't exist, but they are hard carriers. They show up, they drop 20 kills in their game every single time, or they've got all golds, or, you know, what have you. They are the guys, but they don't say anything the entire time they play. And most people would generally rather play with those guys. So, you know what? If shutting up makes you really good at the game in your ranked games, it's totally viable. It's totally viable. You can totally say only what's necessary. But that's where we get into this narration, and that's why I wanted it to be separate, is because what's necessary is a surprisingly large amount of information, right? When we look at what's necessary in a game like Valorant, all of your utility, all of your reloads, every swing, every push, and everything that you hear falls under that category of necessary. You know, if you see it, if you hear it, if you're holding an angle, if you're not holding an angle, all of these things have to be said. They have to be said if you want to be really good and if you want to win a lot of games. If you can narrate every single thing that you're doing, then you don't have to talk. You just have to play. And it's really easy to backseat narration comms. It's really easy to play the game and talk about what it is you're doing in the game. Just kind of keep that in the back of your mind and move around the map like, all right, I'm clearing mid, I'm backing up, I'm headed towards the power up, okay, I've got LG now, all right, I'm pressuring this guy, yeah, he's going down, I'm headed back to mid, still holding mid, all right, I'm getting out of mid, and you just, what are you doing? All the time. At first, it's going to be difficult to think about, don't get me wrong. And some games are a lot easier to do it in than others. This is actually genuinely a pretty hard game to do it in. Because it's so minute. Whereas if you're in a game like Valorant, you can look at it and go, oh, hey, well, I'm smoking. It's a 30-second cooldown, or I only have 3 of these. Like, that's pretty big. I don't do it very often in the game. It's an easy thing to call out. It's an easy thing to pass on. So what you should try and do, like in Overwatch, the game, cooldowns, high pace, but you've got abilities that come up and are available at regular intervals. You should always communicate those, whether you have them, whether you're using them, and who you're on. Maybe not even who you're on so much as just what your abilities are. I would say that the cooldowns in any game are the most important thing. Communicating that is so valuable to playing the game that most people just wouldn't believe the difference that it makes to have that information from a teammate, and to be providing that information in the comms. If all anybody did in comms and ranked was provide all the information that they had, which includes everything that they do and everything that they see, then a lot of people would like ranked a lot more. That's just the truth. But that has got to be the priority. Now, talking is a different story. Talking is complex ideas. Talking is counterplays. Talking is the expansion on the narration. Narration might be like, oh, Zarya used bubble. Talking is, Zarya used bubble, they only have BAP drone. Maybe we can get the kill in the tank. You know, or better yet, pressure the tank. Because you can use the absence of one cooldown to force a more important cooldown. You have to be thinking about all that stuff. You have to be communicating all that stuff. You're organizing people. You're directing people. So warming up your ability to talk is different from warming up your ability to narrate. If you want to warm up your mouth for narration to make your ranked games just a more enjoyable experience for everybody, bring that into that deathmatch. Bring that into your high-paced, high-intensity, pressured warm-up where people are fighting back, narrate what you're doing, narrate your swings, narrate your actions, narrate how you're playing the map. It's really easy in games like Valorant, where there are call outs for locations and you can call your swings and you can say whether or not you're fighting something. When you look at a game more like Overwatch, like you're in tryhard FFA and Overwatch on Chateau, a little bit harder to narrate that, but you still have cooldowns in that mode, so you can call your cooldowns, everything that you're doing, blinking here, blinking there, recalling, dashing, deflecting, all that stuff. And in a game like Overwatch and in Valorant, and really any game with abilities and cooldowns that come back up, calling when something is close is also so valuable. I can't even put it into words, can't even describe it, so I'm not going to try. Makes all the difference in the world. And so that's something that you can add into your gameplay as well. That's an easy way to get your narration comms warmed up before you play. Another good way to do it is stream. Have people there. Talk to them. Communicate with them while you're doing something. Talking comms are a little bit harder. That's a little bit more difficult to warm up. Those are particularly useful if you're playing in an organized team. You're headed into scrims, you're headed into a tournament game, you're headed into officials. And this is where I recommend something that most people don't do often enough when it comes to warm-ups, and that's cross-disciplinary warm-ups, right? I would match my Diabolical sense to my Overwatch and use Diabolical to warm up for Overwatch if there were more people playing it. I could use Quake to do that too. I could use the Nightmare bots in Quake to warm up for Overwatch. Overwatch actually has really good game modes for warming up, and different games have better game modes for warming up than others, right? Like if you're going to warm up for Valorant, I would always recommend starting with Aimlabs or Kovacs. It has scores that you can track, that way you can manage your output and make sure that you're reaching your target goals. It's going to give you really high reps in a really short amount of time, and then you can get into something like Deathmatch. But when it comes to a game more like Overwatch, where it's like, okay, I'm going to start with Aim Arena, and then I'm going to move on to Tryhard FFA, and then I'm going to actually play a game of Overwatch, you don't need to get all across disciplinary on it. Whoa. Keep hitting here. But your gameplay experience is going to depend a lot on how you warm up. And for instance, Valorant lacks those kind of in-depth creative custom games. Unless you are able to put together a high reps 10-man, you're going to struggle to get the comms warmed up the way you want to. But you can get 6 people into a game of Diabolical, have everybody play Wipeout. Diabolical is free on Epic Games, by the way. And that'll allow your team to have this kind of 3v3 warm-up that's high-paced, high-intensity, lots of reps, keeps their hands warm, keeps their minds sharp. It really focuses in on their ability to communicate with each other so that they can actually win the game of Wipeout. It was really fun game mode, a lot of practical application to other areas. And I firmly believe, and this is something that I bring over from a history of physical exercise and working out, is that, and a quote from somebody who was coaching StarCraft 2, if you can't avoid it, enjoy it, right? Can't avoid certain things. There's stuff that you have to do. If you're going to the gym and you're not doing legs, well then you're just missing half of the gym, Or if you want to grow a particular muscle and strengthen it, you got to do an exercise for it. The same is true of playing a video game. You want to be better, you got to train your mechanics, you got to train your decision making, you got to train your communication. You can't avoid these things, so you find a way to enjoy it, and that true is that's true of warm-ups as well. You have to warm these things up if you want to perform at your best every time. So find a way to enjoy it. Do something that you're gonna have fun with. You know, and sometimes that means doing a lower efficiency play. When I'm talking about, okay, your personal warm-up, I'm generally thinking in the sense of like, how do we save as much time as possible? I genuinely think it's possible to be warm in a span of 16 minutes to play competitive Valorant. You do 6 minutes of your aim labs, you do spider shot ultimate, ridge shot ultimate, I think it is, and then the precision. Can't remember exactly what they're called, but you do those 3 things. You do each of them twice, and as long as it's not a really rough day for you, that should be enough to get your mechanics to where you want them. Maybe you do them one more time, but we're looking at 6 to 9 minutes there. And then you do 1 deathmatch. Just 1. You take every fight that you can, but from smart positions, right? So if you load into a game of Ascent, you take A Heaven when you get the opportunity, because it gives you multiple angles to fight that aren't super vulnerable to being completely outflanked. You know, you find positions that allow you to fight people without having to take 6 fights at once. Because, like with my Quake Champions warm-up, if you find yourself facing down 2 people simultaneously, well, you've made a mistake and it's going to get you killed. But if you can isolate every fight, but make sure that they happen in rapid succession, you're going to get a lot out of that, both in terms of your decision making, your positioning, as well as your mechanical activity. So you, theoretically should be able to be warm for a game of Valorant inside of 20 minutes every time. That should take almost every player to peak performance, which is a hell of a lot better than 120 minutes as the average. You know, so spend 20 minutes warming up or lose 2.5 games. Your call. That's kind of the crux of it when I look at warming up. When I look at warming up for an official or a team game, or, you know, like if I had all the time in the world to do a warm-up and the game I was about to go into mattered more than anything else, I would treat it a little differently. I would do probably 10 to 15 minutes worth of aim labs for Valorant. I would do 4 or 5 different maps rather than just 3. I would do 2 games of deathmatch, and then I would have my team that I was going to play with, and I would do something socially engaging with them regardless of the game that it was in and the efficiency, right? I mean, even if we all got together and played Overcooked for an hour before we ended up doing our personal mechanical warm-ups and our death matches together, right? That's still valuable, right? We're still putting everybody in a social environment. We're still communicating. We're still getting engaged. We're still having a good time. Still opening that flow of comms up and getting people to talk, even if it's not about the game. We're having that open flow, that activation of neurons, all that jazz. So do what brings about, you know, the most desirable result at the end of the day. The order is important on a personal level when you're looking at a team, right? I generally, when I get everybody together, I end with the Diabolical Wipeout game. It takes 10 minutes to get everybody really nice and warmed up and activated, and we're able to turn our hour of warming up into a 40-minute, 45-minute, pretty intense warm-up. So far, the results have been pretty good. Warming up is kind of a pet project of mine, so I spend a lot of time thinking about it, working on it. But always looking for better ways to do it. If you have a good warm-up idea, something that you like to do, or maybe you just are wondering if your warm-up is good for the game that you're playing, leave it in the comments. Put it down below on the YouTube video, and I'll check it out, and I'll let you know, or maybe you'll give me a good idea that I can work off of. Always in search of that warm-up we haven't found yet, right? Especially when time is as limited as it is, we want to be as efficient as possible. But yeah, thanks to anybody who stopped by. Hopefully this was helpful. We're going to be going over a whole bunch of different topics, a whole bunch of different things that I've seen and experienced as a coach, ranging from the personal to the professional to the in-game, out-of-game, just common issues, ideal solutions. But in this journey of me hopefully passing on good information to you guys, I'm always open to receiving new information myself. So if there's something I talk on and you've got something to add to it, or feel like you know something that I don't, please, by all means, let's share that and have that conversation, because we definitely want to make sure that we're helping each other as best we can. So thank you guys for stopping by, and I will see you